Assalamu alaikum. This is continuing from the previous video. It got cut off in the middle. Sorry about that. The technical difficulties here. So what happened is the animals that live on the land, they have to be slaughtered, and then you have some animals that live in both places, both sometimes on the land, sometimes in the sea. And the last point we had, when it says the bahriya, the sea animals, it refers to all animals that live in the water, whether it's a pond or a lake or a river or sea or ocean, even in a pool or a tank that a person may have, it refers to that, the ones that live over there. So that's called bahriya, the ones that live in the water, and those animals you don't have to slaughter. And the ones that go on the land, the Sheikh he mentioned that they have to be slaughtered. So the question comes up, what about the animals that live in both places, the water as well as on the land? Some of the animals the Sheikh in the Hanbali school they mentioned specifically, like the frog and the alligator tiger, because there's he says that those are the frog and the alligator and the tiger. He mentions the specific rulings that's coming up later on when he talks about that. So what happens? The issue is that you have animals that sometimes they live in the water and sometimes they live in the land. So do they take the ruling of water animals, the bahriya, where they're allowed that they're dead, or do they take the ruling of land animals where they have to be slaughtered? So some of the ulama, this is what I heard from the sheikh in Medina, who taught in Masjid Nabawi. He says what the ulama they say is you look at where it died, where it got killed. So if it got killed in the water, then you take the ruling of it as a water animal. And then if it got killed on the land, then you take the ruling of it as a land animal where it has to be slaughtered. So that's what the Sheikh mentioned for that. So the point that the Sheikh has over here is that the animals that live on the land, then what happens is they have to be slaughtered. In other words, the blood has to come out. And otherwise, the ones that live in the sea and live in the water, then you don't have to slaughter them. Like, for example, a person, they have a fish, they don't have to slaughter the fish before they cook it and eat it, just cook it directly. That's fine, on the fish. Okay, that's point number 3. Point number 4, it says, Illa saratan wa nahwahu. Then it says, except the crab and what's similar to it. So the Sheikh, he makes in the school of Ahmad Ibn Hanbal and also Ibn Qudama, he says the crab, that you don't have to slaughter the crab which is allowed in Islam. And bear in mind that sometimes you have some crabs that live sometimes in the water, sometimes on the land, but there's some that live only in the water, some that only live on the land. So it makes that as an exception for the crab. And nowadays we know that the crab has an exoskeleton. It has a skeleton on the outside and everything is on the inside. And does it have blood or not? Allahu alam. I don't think it has the blood, but the head is like very negligible. So the Sheikh, he mentions that as an exception. Even though the crab might be on the land, you don't have to slaughter the crab. You can just eat it, even though it was on the land. So that's what the Sheikh makes an exception for the crab, the saratan. Okay, point number 5. وَلَا يُبَاحْ مِنَ الْبَرِّ فِي شَيْءٍ بِغَيْرِ ذَكَاتٍ. So the Sheikh, he says, anything that is a land animal, it's not allowed at all without the slaughtering of it. And we talked about that earlier. So the land animals, the ones that live on the land, bahriya. And over here, when you have iya on the end, that's called the nisba, that's the trait of the animal. So some animals, they're called bahriya, which means the water, their trait is the water. And some of them are called barriya, which means the land animals, their trait is to be on the land. So he says the animals that are barriya, the ones that are land animals that have the trait, that have the nisba of being on the land, they're not allowed except to be slaughtered. And this refers to like the cattle, people that have camels and cows and sheep and goats, they have to be slaughtered. Refers to also refers to the animals that are hunted. The blood has to come out, so that's what he means by that, by the cat. For the most part, there's different ways that a person they can remove the blood from the animal to slaughter it, and the Sheikh, he talks about that in the next lesson, which is the conditions of the slaughtering. So the ones in the land, this is just repeating the point before, they have to be slaughtered. The ones in the water, they don't have to be slaughtered. In other words, the blood has to come out from them. So if you have a land animal, if they are drowned, they're not allowed. If you drown them, they died from drowning, they're not allowed. If they're choked, a person, they choke it, they don't have the air, they're not allowed. Sometimes nowadays they have the poisonous gas that they use, the argon gas, and it's supposed to stun the animal, but if it dies from that, it's not allowed. And then also sometimes you have the electrocution, that's not allowed, it has to be slaughtered. The electrocuting animal, the land animal, is not allowed. And also if it's hit by a blow, the land animal, it's not slaughtered, it's not allowed. So all those things are there for the case of the land animal. They have to be slaughtered. That's point number 5. Okay, and point 6 says, Illa jarad wa shabbahuhu, except the locust and what resembles it. And the locust, what happened in the hadith from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the people, they went on the Suriyah. The Suriyah is the battles they went without Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the hadith says that they went on Sabah Ghazawat, on the 7 Ghazawats. The Ghazawat mean on the battle with Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam present with them. And Suriyah means that they went on a battle without Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam present with them. That's what the ulama, they say. So they went on 7 of them and they ate the locust. They ate the locust. And what the locust is, it's like a grasshopper. In Arabic, you have the term jarad, and it refers to all the animals that are similar to it. So all the animals that are like the locust and like the grasshopper and that's similar to it would fall into the same ruling, that they are allowed and you don't have to slaughter them. And what happens is with the locust, some of the ulama, they say it's a accumulation of many different animals. The head of a tiger and the body of a horse and the wings of a bird and things like that. So that's what some of the ulama, they mention. And what happens is the locusts, what they happen, they come in huge numbers, like hundreds of thousands at a time, and they cover the sky. And so what they do, they swarm in the sky, and people, they say it's an ummah, a whole nation of locusts, because there's so many of them. And what happens is, if you see them what happens is they cover the sky and it becomes like nighttime because there's so many of them that are there. And they go into a field and they just devour the whole field because there's so many of them at a time. So people, what they do is they collect them and they cook them and they eat them. And a lot of times they'll do it even while they don't slaughter them, they just take it directly and they cook them. That's what's mentioned in some of the narrations. So that's what the Sheikh mentions, except for the locusts and what's similar to them. The person, they are allowed to eat them. That's an exception for the case of slaughtering. The other insects, what happens in the Hanbali school, they don't allow the other insects, beetles and bugs and things like that. So they mentioned that it has to be, they're talking about animals that are smaller than the size of a cat. That's what they mentioned. So they mentioned these things in the other references about in the Hanbali school about the insects. And also he mentions the vermins. He talks about the mouse. That's mentioned later on, that they're not allowed. So that's the case for the insects and the vermins, and the mouse are not allowed. So over here, the Sheikh, he mentioned that the locust is allowed, and that was mentioned in the text of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that the Sahaba, they did eat locusts. And the grasshoppers and locusts are very similar. Praying mantis also, that's another one that's similar to it. So all the ones that resemble it, they are allowed. That's what the Shaykh mentioned. All right, inshallah, let's go to the next one. He says, وَالذَّكَاةِ تَقْسِمْ ثَلَاثَةَ أَقْسَامٍ. So the slaughtering, it's 3 different types, 3 different ways to do it. And that's how a person, what they do is, if they have an animal, they want to slaughter it, there's 3 different ways to slaughter it. The first one he mentioned is nahr. Nahr. And Allah, he mentions that in Surah Al-Kawthar, Inna atayna kal kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar. And nahr, it means slaughtering. And the way that you do the slaughtering, it's stabbing. So a person, what they do is they take a spear and they poke it into the neck of the animal, and they poke it all the way down to the heart, and it stabs the heart. And what happens is the blood comes out, and they call that nahr. That's the term for it, the nahr. That's one way that a person, they can slaughter the animal by doing that, by stabbing it on the neck and going to the heart. where the blood comes out. And that's referred in Arabic is called nahr. That's the first way. And the second way, number 8, it says dhubiha. And dhubiha, it talks about slaughtering on the neck. And that's the one that's most common. People, what they do is they take a knife. It has to be a sharp knife. And the person, they should not frighten the animal. And they cut on the neck. And then the blood comes out. And then what happens is on the neck, there's 4 different tubes there. There's 2 for the blood, 1 for the food, and 1 for the air. And they talk about that in the next lesson, on the conditions of the slaughtering. So that's the second way. If they cut on the neck, and they cut the blood comes out from the neck. And that's the second way of doing the slaughtering. The first one is the nahr, the second one is the cut. And what happens is you find in America over here, people, the dhubiha, they call it, that's the second way. And people over here in America, they have a word called zabiha. And the reason for that is the original word is dhubiha, which means to slaughter on the neck. And what people, they do is some people, they have the opinion that it should only be slaughtered by Muslims and saying the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they slaughter it. So they don't like it when people, they say things are halal, because they go by the opinion that people, they didn't mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on it, so they say it's halal. So they say, is it dhubiha, where they slaughtered it and they mentioned the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then what they said, the people that say that, they mispronounce the dha into a za. So they say, instead of dhubiha, they say zabiha. So then you find that people, they go and they ask, is the food zabiha halal, they say. And that's what they mean by it, that if it's slaughtered by a Muslim mentioning the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they mispronounce the dha into a za. So they say zabiha, which means cut on the neck in the appropriate way. That's the term that came there. And nowadays, people in Pakistan, the Mufti of Pakistan, he became more strict, and he said that it can't be machine slaughtered. So they would say hand slaughtered, zabiha, that's the term that they use, not the machine slaughtered. So those are other issues that the ulama, they look into, and they give their rulings on those issues. So that's the second way to do it. It's called a zabiha, to cut on the neck, where a person, they have an animal, and they cut on the neck. And in the next section, it talks about what's necessary to cut on the neck, because there are 4 different tubes there. So that's the second way. The third way the Sheikh, he mentioned, is akar, and I translated that to be puncturing. And what that is akar, like it's mentioned about the people of Saleh. قال ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فأكروها. They rejected Saleh, and they hamstrung the camel that was there, that they were supposed to treat good and nice. And the Sheikh, he used the same word, akar. And over here, what he means is that what happens is if the blood comes out from a different location, like on the leg, it also has a meaning. Like what they would do is on the camel, they would have the front legs, and between the foot and the knee, they would cut that part off, and then what remains is above the knee. So that's some of the meanings that if you look up akar, that's what it refers to. But the Sheikh over here, he means like if a person, they set a trap, like a trap that's on the ground, and when the animal steps on it, the trap closes, and it kills the animal from closing onto the animal. So that's what he means by that akar. And also the Sheikh, he means like if a person, if they have an arrow or something that penetrates the animal, the blood comes out. So all those meanings are there in the third way. And the way that I translated it is puncturing, because that's the thing to bear in mind, that the blood has to come out. So you have all these other methods that you do it, that the blood comes out. And so that's a translation for akar. But if people, they want to have more information about it, they can read the Sheikh's bigger volume, which is called the Mughni, which is 40 volumes long, and he can go into detail about the akar and a more extensive detail of what that refers to. This one here is a mukhtasar, which is a summary of the rulings for it. So those are the 3 ways that the Sheikh, he mentioned. The dhubiha, cutting on the neck, the nahar, stabbing, and the akar, which is the puncturing. Those are the three ways. Okay, let's go to the next. It says, وَيَسْتَحِبْ النَّهَرْ الْإِبِلْ وَذُبِهَا مَا سَوَاهَا. So it's recommended to do the stabbing, the nahar, on camels, and to cut on the neck on other things besides that. And you find that's normally what's done on the camel. When a person, they're going to slaughter a camel, they take a spear and they poke it on its neck and poke the heart, and that's usually done with camels. Then the sheep and the goats, usually people, they slaughter it on the neck. That's how it's normally done. They take a sharp knife and they go and they slaughter the animal, and the blood comes out from the neck. So that's how they do on the other animals. And the cows, the sheikh over here said the cows too, usually they slaughter on the neck. But some of the ulama, they say that both of them are what's done for the cows. So that's what he says. So usually for camels, it's recommended for the nahar, for the stabbing, and other animals, it's recommended to slaughter on the neck. That's what the sheikh mentioned. Okay, that's point number 10. Then point number 11, فَإِن نَهَرْ مَا يَذْبَحُ أَوْ ذَبَحُ مَا يَنْهَرُ فَجَائِزٌ. So what happens is, it is allowed to do the nahar on things that do the dhubiha. It's allowed to do the stabbing on things that normally they do the slaughtering on the neck. And it's allowed to slaughter on the neck on the things that normally a person, they stab. In other words, for camels, normally you do the stabbing, but you can do the slaughtering on the neck as well for them. And the sheep and the goats, normally you slaughter on the neck, but also you can do the nahar, you can stab them as well through the neck and poke the heart. That's allowed also. And cows, usually both are done. That's what many of the ulama, they say, but you can do either way on the cow, either the stabbing, the nahar, or the dhubiya. Those things are mentioned there. And also there's an issue that comes out nowadays. People, what they do is they shock the animal first, or they stun the animal first, and then they slaughter it afterwards. And the thing to bear in mind is that you got to make sure that the blood comes out when the person, they do that. So sometimes people, they take a bolt and hit a cow or a bull, and that knocks it out, but it's still alive and breathing and heart pumping. Then they slaughter it and the blood comes out. So some people, they do that. So that, normally speaking to ulama, they say is allowed because the blood comes out. But if doing that, it kills the animal, then it would not be allowed. So that's what the ulama, they say. That's the ruling that the ulama, they give by it, going by the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there's an issue also in America that you have particular laws and regulations over here. And, you got to look into it, see what they are in the Department of Agriculture, where they have a lot of regulations for it, and see, to make sure that the blood comes out of the animals. And in some cases, it doesn't come out, and the blood doesn't come out, and the ulama would say that would not be allowed, provided that the other conditions are there. So that's the thing to bear in mind. And the other thing is, when you have the trapping and the killing of animals, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands to have the rifq, the kindness, and the mercy. So a person, they shouldn't harm the animals unnecessarily. They shouldn't cause pain to the animals. So that's another thing to bear in mind about that. No, but the other thing is, some people, they say that they want to be kind to animals, so they don't eat any meat whatsoever. But what happens is, they got to follow the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah made those things allowed. And what I say for those people, if you say you're going to be kind to animals, not eat any animals, what about to the plants? Be kind to the plants. So don't eat plants either. Then what happens? The only thing a person they can eat is chemicals, and nothing is left. The person is going to starve to death. They're going to be kind to the animal, kind to the plants, nothing to eat. So the things, you can't go by that logic. You got to go by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. Allah made for you all the things on the earth, and Allah allowed these particular animals to eat, as long as you treat them nicely and kindly, and likewise in the plants. So a person, they do that, they're going too extreme, and a person, they got to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and go by the things that Allah allowed, and forbid the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade. All right, I think this comes to the end of this lesson. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you much goodness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you much in the beneficial knowledge. And what happens of the things that I said from the ilm, accept that and learn that and follow that. Anything I said from besides that, from my own self, just disregard it and don't follow that, or follow the knowledge that came through from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Imam Ahmad and the ulama until today's day and age. And you go by that, and nothing from my own self. Don't follow that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Wallahu alam. And may the peace and blessings be upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.